A group of kids laughed as they pelted pebbles at a filthy, limping stray dog near the park fountain. One boy whistled mockingly, mimicking a soldier's march. The dog didn't move, until suddenly it rose, stood on its hind legs, and raised its right paw to its brow. Perfect military salute. The laughter stopped. Gasps filled the air. One mom dropped her phone. Another whispered, "That's not just any dog." Every town has its own secrets, some buried in books, others in basements. But in the sleepy town of Ashbury, a secret stood right out in the open. In the middle of a sunny green park, tail tucked, ribs showing, and eyes scanning faces like it had seen too many and trusted none. No one knew where the dog came from. It showed up one day, mud-caked and silent, and just stayed. Most people ignored it. Some offered scraps, but kids were cruel, especially when no one was watching. And yet, the town had no idea that this stray wasn't lost at all. It had come with a purpose, and it remembered everything. The afternoon sun had begun to dip behind the willow trees lining the west side of Ashbury Park. Laughter echoed from the jungle gym as kids raced across monkey bars and swings creaked with rhythm. Among them were Tyler, age 12, self-declared leader of his crew, and his ever-present sidekick Ricky, smaller, rounder, but always ready to follow. "Watch this," Tyler smirked, scooping up a pebble. He aimed it at the motionless dog by the fountain. Sniper shot. The pebble landed just inches from the dog's paw. No reaction, just a blank stare from those amber eyes. Ricky chuckled. "Bet it's too dumb to even bark." Another kid joined in, tossing a twig. "Hey, soldier dog, 10 hut." Tyler mocked a salute and marched around the fountain, exaggerating each step. The others laughed, but the dog slowly rose. It didn't growl. It didn't whimper. It stood up straight with an eerie grace, one hind leg trembling. Then, before anyone could speak, it raised its right front paw to its forehead. A salute, perfectly aligned. Held for 3 seconds. Gasps. A long silence. Tyler's smirk vanished. "What the heck?" Ricky whispered. One mom walking nearby paused mid-call. Her phone dropped into the grass. "That's military. That's not normal." Kids backed away. Some even ran. But one girl, Lena, age 10, stood frozen. "Mom!" She tugged her mother's sleeve. "Why did the dog do that?" Her mother didn't answer, because truth be told, she recognized the salute. Within hours, the park buzzed with whispers. "I swear it saluted. My brother saw it too. Maybe it was trained. Maybe it escaped from the army or something." Even the town's Facebook group lit up. "Weird dog at Ashbury Park? Can dogs be veterans?" At the local animal shelter, the director Maya Denzel frowned at her screen. "I know every stray in this district," she muttered. "That one's different." She leaned back in her chair, gazing at the blurry image someone had posted of the dog mid-salute. "Where the hell did you come from?" Lena returned the next morning with a small sandwich wrapped in foil. Unlike the others, she didn't mock the dog. She approached slowly, knelt, and unwrapped the food. The dog didn't move. "It's turkey. I asked my mom," Lena whispered, placing it on the grass and backing away. The dog waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then limped forward and sniffed. In silence, it ate. Slowly. Deliberately. Lena smiled. But what happened next made her gasp. The dog, after finishing, stepped back and gave another salute. This time just for her. The town's retired Army General Walter Briggs, 78, sat in his recliner flipping through the news when something caught his eye. He dropped his mug. There, on the screen, was a grainy photo of a saluting dog, standing beside the Ashbury Park fountain. Copper, he breathed. His hands trembled. No, it can't be. But somewhere deep in his soul he knew that was his dog. Flashback: Kandahar, Afghanistan, 2012. Explosions rattled the night. Smoke filled the air. Screams echoed across the base. General Briggs barked into his radio. "Where's Copper? Has anyone seen Copper?" "He went back in, sir," a soldier yelled. "What?" "That building's collapsing." But from the dust, Copper emerged. His vest torn, leg bleeding, and in his mouth was the forgotten sat phone that saved their comms. He dropped it at the general's boots, sat down, and saluted. It became legend. But a year later, after retiring, Copper was sent to live with Briggs. That is, until he vanished during a trip to the lake with a caretaker. Lost, presumed dead. Until now. The sun had barely risen over Ashbury Park, casting golden light across dew-kissed grass, but the whispers had already begun. By mid-morning, half the town had seen the video. A skinny, limping dog, saluting. And now, standing in the center of the park, with one hand resting gently on the dog's head, was General Walter Briggs. Not in uniform, not giving a speech, just standing there, crying. No one dared interrupt. By 8 a.m., local news vans had arrived. The general refused interviews at first. He simply sat on a bench with the dog, Copper beside him, both watching the swings gently sway in the wind. Children arrived for their usual playtime and stopped short. Parents, uncomfortable, murmured apologies under their breath. Tyler, the ringleader from the day before, stood at a distance. He tugged nervously at the strap of his backpack. Is that really a war dog?" he asked his mom. His mom didn't answer. She was already scrolling through an article titled, "The Hero with Four Legs." General Briggs' confirmed saluting stray was once a decorated K-9 operative. The Department of Defense rarely made such files public, but exceptions were made for fallen human soldiers, and now one for a dog. Copper, a Belgian Malinois trained at Lackland Air Force Base, had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. He had located 32 IEDs, saved over 40 lives, been injured twice in the line of duty, and received the Distinguished Service Canine Medal. General Briggs had handpicked Copper for his final deployment. "He wasn't just a dog," the general had once told a closed room of officers. "He was our conscience in hell." So how did a hero like Copper end up filthy, limping, and starving in a suburban park? That's what no one could explain. By noon, Ashbury's mayor arrived. She shook hands with the general and offered words of support. "We'd like to honor Copper," she said gently. "Maybe name a park bench after him or—" "No," the general interrupted, voice low but firm. "He doesn't need a plaque. He needs peace." The mayor hesitated. "But the kids, what they did. They didn't know. And now they do," he said. "Let that be enough." Still, the media frenzy continued. Copper, seemingly unfazed, lay calmly at Briggs' feet. But his eyes never stopped scanning. Always alert, always ready. Some instincts don't fade even after war. Later that afternoon, Lena, the young girl who had offered Copper a sandwich, returned with a small drawing in her hand. It was a picture of Copper saluting with a caption that read, "Thank you for protecting people like my dad." Her father was an active-duty Marine. She handed it to the general and knelt beside the dog. Tyler stood awkwardly behind her, guilt written all over his face. He shuffled forward and mumbled, "I'm sorry, sir, for throwing rocks. I didn't know." Briggs studied him for a long second, then nodded. "Now you do." Copper, as if sensing the shift, stood and walked toward Tyler. Tyler froze. The dog sat, looked him in the eye, then saluted. The general invited only a few close friends to his home later that evening. Among them was Maya Denzel, director of the local shelter. "How could he survive out there for so long?" she asked, watching Copper rest by the fireplace. "I've been asking myself the same thing," Briggs admitted. "He disappeared 3 years ago. We searched everywhere. We thought—" He didn't finish the sentence. Maya frowned. "There's something else. Look at his scars. Some are new. And see this." She gently touched the matted fur behind Kappa's ear. "That's a microchip scar. But the chip's missing." Briggs' eyes narrowed. Someone removed it. That night, Briggs couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, staring at an old map of the town. Copper had always been smart, tactical, calculated. If he'd survived this long, it wasn't just luck. He'd escaped something. The missing microchip, the fresh scars, the subtle signs of recent trauma. It wasn't just time that wore him down. Someone had him, and he got away. But from where? And why come back now? The following morning, Briggs took Copper to the town's best veterinarian, Dr. Lynn Moreau. She examined Copper carefully, checking vitals, eyes, teeth, legs, and finally his back. "This dog's been through hell," she whispered. "Can you tell how long he's been out there?" Briggs asked. Dr. Moreau hesitated. "He hasn't. Not the whole time." "What do you mean?" "These aren't just injuries from the street. He's had medical treatment. See the scar? That's a clean suture. Whoever had him knew what they were doing." Briggs felt his throat tighten. "So he was captured? Or sold?" That night, as Copper slept beside the fireplace, Briggs gently brushed the dog's coat. Then, beneath the collarbone, he felt it. Something small. Metal. He fetched his tool kit. 10 minutes later, he placed a tiny tracking chip on the table. Not a pet microchip. A military-grade GPS beacon. It had still been active. Whoever had tracked Copper could still be watching. On the edge of Ashbury, in the shadows of a car wash, a black SUV idled quietly. Inside sat 2 men in dark suits. One stared at a tablet, the signal blinking red before suddenly vanishing. "He found it," the man muttered. "The chip's offline." His partner tapped the dashboard. "What now?" The man didn't answer. He just narrowed his eyes at the blinking dot on the screen, just moments before it disappeared. Then he whispered, "Now we move." General Briggs sat silently at his kitchen table. The dismantled GPS tracker lay in pieces on a napkin beside his coffee cup. Copper rested on the floor near the fireplace, unaware, or perhaps uncaring, that his presence had set off a chain of events far more dangerous than the children at the park could ever have imagined. Across town, the black SUV had vanished. But the ripple effects of its presence were just beginning. The Ashbury Daily hit newsstands at 7 a.m. Retired General's dog was a decorated K9, but why was he chipped like a spy? Below the headline, a side column whispered even darker questions. Did someone use a military hero for illegal operations? The article referenced unnamed sources and confidential communications between federal departments. By noon, the general's phone rang. Blocked number. He answered cautiously. "Briggs." "General," said a deep, calm voice. "You've made quite the discovery. We suggest you forget it." "Who is this?" "Someone who remembers how many lives Copper saved. Don't tarnish his legacy by dragging it into classified mud." The line went dead. Briggs stared at the silent receiver. Someone out there was watching, and afraid. That night, Copper whimpered in his sleep. His paws twitched. He growled softly, his mind reliving something violent, something recent. Briggs watched him closely. In his years commanding men in war, he'd seen PTSD in soldiers. Now he saw it in Copper. This wasn't trauma from years ago in the field. This was fresh. Briggs made a decision. He picked up the phone and called Maya Denzel from the shelter. "Get me a list of every private security firm that operates military-trained dogs within a 200-mile radius." Maya's research uncovered something strange. "There's a company called Falcon Claw Services," she said over coffee. "On paper, they're a high-end security firm. But what?" Briggs leaned in. "Their K-9 roster includes over a dozen dogs supposedly donated by the military. Some of those dogs are listed as deceased. Others were never supposed to be sold." "Was Copper on the list?" She shook her head. "No, but 2 dogs who trained alongside him were. Both declared dead after service. Yet both were active in Falcon Claw's logs, until last year." Briggs's eyes darkened. "Where's their base?" "Outside Greystone Ridge, 40 miles north." He stood up. "We're going." Briggs loaded Copper into the back of his Jeep. The dog's ears perked as if sensing purpose again. The road out of Ashbury was empty, the town still trying to catch its breath from the news storm. Halfway there, Maya's phone buzzed. An anonymous email. One image attached. No message. She gasped. It was a photo of Copper, scarred, caged, and muzzled. The timestamp? For months ago. The building was surrounded by a tall black fence, cameras on every corner. It didn't look like a dog training facility. It looked like a fortress. Maya stayed in the Jeep while Briggs approached the gate. A speaker crackled. "State your business." "General Walter Briggs. I need to speak to your director. It's about a dog." "Unit name Copper 5. Silence. Then a mechanical voice responded, "Turn back, General. You're trespassing." Briggs stared at the black glass windows. Someone was watching. He turned and walked back toward the car, but not before slipping a small flash drive into a nearby power box. Back home that night, Maya plugged in the drive. Briggs had installed a stealth signal interceptor years ago, designed for extracting surveillance feeds from encrypted systems. It still worked. They watched, stunned, as footage from Falcon Claw's interior began downloading. Footage of cages, rows of them, some empty, others with dogs pacing inside. And then they saw Copper, thin, frightened, dragged down a hallway by men in black. Briggs slammed his fist on the table. They were using him, maybe for smuggling, maybe worse. Maya pointed to a screen in the corner. "Look, coordinates. That's a delivery log." It listed a warehouse. Not in the U.S. In Venezuela. The next day, Tyler, the boy who had mocked Copper at the park, showed up at Briggs's porch holding a crumpled notebook. "My uncle works at a warehouse in Falcon Claw," he confessed. "I heard him talking on the phone last night. He said, 'The Mutt's reactivation cost us everything.' I think he meant Copper." Briggs knelt to eye level. "Do you know where the warehouse is?" Tyler nodded. "I heard him say Mount Walker. That's where the trucks go." Briggs turned to Maya. "Let's go." Mount Walker was an old mining site now abandoned, at least that's what records said. But hidden behind its cliff walls was a metal bunker, surrounded by chain fencing and armed guards. A transport truck sat parked out front. Inside the Jeep, Maya swallowed hard. "This is serious, Walter." Briggs loaded his old Army-issued sidearm. "So am I." They waited until nightfall. Then, under the cover of darkness, they crept along the edge of the ridge. Copper moved with silent discipline. No barks, no hesitation. When they reached the edge of the property, they saw it. Crates, marked with symbols. Not food or supplies, weapons. They didn't get far. As Briggs lifted his camera to photograph the crates, a silent sensor tripped. Lights flared. Sirens screamed. "Geo!" he yelled. They ran. Copper darted ahead, leading them through an overgrown path Briggs hadn't even noticed. The dog remembered, maybe from past escape attempts. But this time they didn't make it out fast enough. Two men cut them off near the jeep. One aimed a taser. The other raised a weapon. Briggs shielded Maya. Copper launched. A blur of fur and fury. The first man fell, screaming. The second fired but missed. Copper was hit. He stumbled, but didn't stop. He stood between his humans and the threat, and saluted. Copper's wounded body stood like a monument in the headlights. His pole remained lifted in a perfect salute, an act not of obedience, but of defiance. The gunman hesitated. For a moment, the air held its breath. Then one of them whispered, almost in awe, "It's him!" The other lowered his weapon, then cursed and raised it again. Too late. A pair of loud shots cracked through the darkness, not from the gunman. From behind, headlights flared, tires screeched, and law enforcement vehicles came tearing down the mountainside road. "Down on the ground!" an officer shouted as red and blue lights flooded the area. General Briggs turned toward Maya. "You called them?" She shook her head. "No, I didn't have time." As Briggs knelt beside Copper, pressing a cloth to his wound, a man in a sleek gray coat stepped forward. "General Walter Briggs," the man said, showing a badge. "I'm Agent Harlow, Federal Intelligence." Briggs looked up, eyes narrow. "You're late." Harlow didn't smile. "We were never far, but we needed them to take the bait. And you and your dog gave us the opening." Maya interrupted. "So you used them? You let them nearly die?" "No," Harlow said, voice low. "We trusted Copper would find his way home, and that when he did, he'd lead us to the truth." Briggs didn't respond. His hand trembled on Copper's side. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Copper was lifted onto a stretcher with care usually reserved for wounded officers. His chest rose and fell shallowly, but he was alive. The medics whispered as they worked, stunned to discover his military ID tattoo, perfectly preserved beneath his fur. "Get him to the Army Vet Hospital," Briggs ordered. The paramedics nodded. "Already called ahead." As the ambulance pulled away, Maya clutched Briggs's arm. "You okay?" "No," he said, voice gravelly. "But I will be when this is over." Inside the hidden Mount Walker bunker, agents uncovered crates packed with weapons, cash, and microchips, some embedded with tracking data for military canines. Falcon Claw wasn't just a rogue security firm. It was a black market K-9 trafficking ring, using retired or stolen military dogs for illegal transport, weapons guarding, and even political intimidation in unstable regions. Copper had escaped, but not before witnessing everything. And now his presence had exposed it all. Photos of him sitting stoically in his cage circulated internally between agencies. They called him the silent whistleblower. Within 24 hours, the story broke nationwide. Military dog leads authorities to underground operation. Retired general's loyalty saves dozens of canines. From mocked stray to national hero, meet Copper. Across Ashbury and beyond, people began leaving flowers, dog treats, and handwritten notes outside the vet hospital. Tyler, the boy who once mocked him, showed up with a poster that read, "I'm sorry, Copper. You're braver than I'll ever be." Meanwhile, Tyler had changed. The viral video of Copper's salute and the boy's guilt had made him rethink everything. He started volunteering at the shelter with Maya. One afternoon, as he brushed a shy rescue dog, he turned to her. "I didn't know they could remember like that. Salute. Suffer. Maya smiled. Dogs don't forget who they are. They just wait for the world to remember. 2 days later, Briggs entered the sterile, silent hallway of the Army Vet Hospital. Copper lay in a recovery bed, hooked to monitors but conscious. His ears perked up the moment Briggs entered. The general sat down beside him. "You saved us all," he whispered, brushing a hand through the dog's fur. "Even when no one believed in you." Copper blinked slowly. Then, despite the pain, he moved his front leg, just slightly, toward a salute. Briggs grabbed it gently, tears forming in his eyes. "No need, soldier. You've done more than enough." 1 week later, Copper was honored in Washington, D.C. On the steps of the Capitol building, surrounded by dignitaries, military officers, and hundreds of emotional citizens, the president awarded him the Medal of Valor for non-human service. As the medal was pinned gently to his vest, Copper sat upright, posture proud, eyes alert. Briggs stood at his side, dressed in his old uniform. When the applause rose like thunder, Copper lifted his paw and saluted the nation. That night, as the nation celebrated, Briggs sat quietly at his desk. He held a folder. Inside, surveillance images. Among them, one photo stood out. A man in falcon claw uniform watching Copper's cage with too much familiarity. Briggs turned to Maya. "This man, he was never arrested." She frowned. "You think he got away?" "I think—" Briggs tapped the photo. "He's the one who released Copper." Maya leaned closer. "Why would he do that?" "I don't know. But I intend to find out. Because if someone inside the operation had a conscience, they might also have secrets. And Copper wasn't just a survivor. He was a key." The medal shone under the soft light of the living room lamp. General Briggs sat quietly in his recliner, staring at it. Not with pride, but with resolve. Across the room, Copper dozed peacefully, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. His injuries had healed, but his soul bore marks only Briggs could see. On the coffee table beside him, the photo. The man near Copper's cage, face half-turned, uniform shadowed. Something about the posture haunted him. Briggs whispered to himself, "Why would someone working for Falcon Claw help Copper escape?" Briggs wasn't the kind of man to let questions linger. He called in a few favors, old friends from intelligence circles. Turned out the man in the photo had a name, Jonas Reeve, former military dog handler. Discharged under murky circumstances. Records showed he'd vanished 2 years ago, only to resurface in Falcon Claw. But here's the twist. Jonas had once worked in Briggs's own unit. He had trained alongside Briggs and Copper. A former ally turned operative in a criminal network? Briggs's jaw clenched. This isn't over. Meanwhile, back in Ashbury, Maya and Tyler were at the shelter. Tyler, now deeply involved, was sorting through a box of donated dog tags and ID collars when he pulled one out, scuffed, but intact. "Hey, Maya." She looked over. "This tag, it says K9 Dagger. Wasn't that one of the names you mentioned from Briggs's unit?" Maya's eyes widened. "Yeah, Dagger was Copper's partner. But Dagger had gone missing during the same mission where Copper had been injured." Tyler turned the tag over. A phone number was scratched in, crudely etched. It wasn't military. It was personal. Briggs dialed the number. It rang, and rang, then click. "Speak," said a gruff voice. "Jonas, it's Briggs." Silence. A breath. "You weren't supposed to find me, and yet you left a trail." Briggs heard a bitter chuckle. Copper always was the better tracker. "I want the truth," Briggs said. "Why did you help him escape?" "Because I owed him," Jonas replied. "And because I couldn't watch what they were doing anymore." Dogs trained to protect turned into tools of terror. Briggs's voice hardened. Where's Dagger? Another pause. Then alive, but not safe. Jonas revealed Dagger had been taken by Falcon Claw during a failed transport operation. When Jonas realized what the group truly did, he staged Kappa's release and fled, hiding in the forests of Pine Rock Ridge. Briggs didn't hesitate. With Maya and a now-healed Copper by his side, he prepared one final mission, off the books. This time not to fight a war, but to rescue a brother. They hiked deep into the woods, armed with knowledge only Jonas could provide. And as they reached a clearing, they saw him, tied, emaciated, but alive. Dagger. The moment Copper saw him, he let out a low whimper, a sound Briggs hadn't heard in years. But Falcon Claw wasn't done. As they freed Dagger, voices echoed from the woods. Flashlights, footsteps, then a voice. You should have stayed out, Briggs. A dozen armed men stepped into view, weapons raised. But Jonas had followed, too. From behind, he stepped out of the shadows. No, you should have never touched the dogs. He threw down a smoke flare. Chaos erupted. Briggs pulled Maya behind a tree. Copper and Dagger flanked them. Jonas and Briggs, side by side for the first time in years, moved with synchronized precision, like soldiers who had never lost their rhythm. And the dogs? They didn't need commands. They remembered what they were. Guardians. When the smoke cleared, half the mercenaries were on the ground. The rest ran. Copper and Dagger stood like living statues, flanking their handlers. Jonas, bloodied but breathing, collapsed to his knees. I'm sorry, he whispered to Briggs. I lost my way. Briggs nodded, silent. They carried Jonas and the dogs out together. This time, no one was left behind. Back in Ashbury, the town had changed. The park where it all started now had a new statue. 2 dogs, side by side, one saluting. At the base, the inscription read, "For those who protect, even when forgotten." In honor of Copper and Dagger. Maya visited every weekend. Tyler often came, laying down bones and notes from other kids. One read, "You taught me that strength isn't in barking loud, but in standing tall." In the final scene, Briggs writes a letter, his handwriting neat but weathered. To whoever finds this, I've seen men honored for actions far less noble than what I saw in the eyes of my dogs. They knew duty, loyalty, forgiveness. If only more of us could follow their example. Copper reminded the world that heroes don't always stand on 2 legs. Sometimes, they salute in silence. Ret. General Walter Briggs. He folded it, placed it in a box beside Kappa's collar, and left it at the foot of the statue. Then he walked home, Copper and Dagger trotting quietly behind him. Tails high, heads proud. Thank you so much for joining us on this unforgettable journey. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or made you see dogs a little differently, please consider giving it a like and sharing it with someone who needs a reminder of the silent heroes among us. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories that stir your soul and open your eyes. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and always look twice before you ignore a stray. They might just be a hero in disguise. Paw prints.